Hey everyone, this is JT Curtis. So this is sort of a follow-up video to our 1970s rock video. There's just so many bands, so many artists, so many classic moments from the 1970s, it's just not possible to summon them all up in one video. Unfortunately, many of you commented on some notable bands and notable artists from that decade, so now's the time to finish the 1970s. This is the history of rock and roll, the 1970s extras.
Okay, so I've been meaning to say
I'm
this.
kind of wondering
Spent
something,
so much
sir.
time on the Bee Gees.
Why have you not
First of all, they're
mentioned
disco in the
Meatloaf video?
70s.
Why have you not mentioned anything involving Genesis, the final days of Elvis? I'm kind of wondering why you decided to skip over that. Are you some sort of...
Let's start off with a band that I wanted to talk about, Genesis. Rightly so, there were a lot of comments asking why Genesis wasn't in the original video. I had planned to talk about my favorite Genesis album, The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. And the Lamb lies down on Broadway. I was even going to attempt to play Tony Banks' iconic piano intro at the beginning of the album.
Wait a second, I thought I was gonna play it.
Oh no, I would have played it.
No, you couldn't play it if your life depended on it.
Ooh, shots fired! Well, that wasn't actually the reason. The biggest problem I had with trying to fit this album in the video was I couldn't find any usable footage from this tour. From what I can see from amateur footage and pictures, it looks like quite a spectacle, especially with Peter Gabriel's elaborate costumes.
Your skin is all covered in slimy lumps.
I had a similar problem with Dark Side of the Moon, and that there's really no footage from that tour either. But there was no way I was going to leave that album out of the video. So because of the trouble I had finding footage and just trying to keep the video short, Genesis had to be cut from the final edit. But make no mistake about it, they were a classic band from the 70s, whether led by Peter Gabriel or Phil Collins.
With all the king's horses and all the king's men, they could never put a smile on my face.
Yeah, you had time to mention the Bee Gees, but you didn't have time to mention Genesis.
Are you still on that?
Yes.
You know what? Why don't
Yes.
you edit the next episode of the History
You
of
know
Rock and
what?
Roll?
Maybe
Why don't
I
you do
will.
that?
Guys, listen. We're getting worked up over a silly video. We're all adults here. Can't we just discuss this in a civilized manner, huh?
Yeah,
All right,
yes.
all right, he's
He's
right.
gonna be an adult, I'll be one.
That's
Yep.
right.
So let me ask you this. Why did you forget Rush, you stupid mother? This is actually the band we got the most comments about, and it's easy to see why. Originally from Canada, posers, Rush is a kick-ass band.
Right night away from here, change my life again.
Even if Geddy Lee sings like an old woman.
Yeah, he kinda does.
Well, this omission was actually intentional because, as many of you know, Rush has a very iconic album that came out in the 1980s, which we're definitely going to talk about. Still, Rush was right there in the 70s with all the great progressive bands, thanks to albums like 2112.
Walk against some life, walk hell with an evil wall.
Okay, so enough about the progressive rock bands. Can we talk about how AC/DC was not mentioned in this video at all?
It's a long way to the top if you wanna rock and roll.
I mean, bone-crunching guitar riffs, Bon Scott's scratchy voice, and Angus Young strutting around in a schoolboy's uniform.
Yeah, that's not creepy in the slightest.
Even Jack Black in School of Rock was channeling his inner Angus Young.
Riding down the highway, going to the show.
Isn't AC/DC just about as classic rock as it gets?
Well, again, much like Rush, they happen to have a very iconic album that came out in 1980.
Yes, but they also had a ton of hits that came out in the 70s. We're talking TNT, Dirty Deeds, I'm on a highway to hell.
Okay. Okay, point taken. But trust me when I say AC/DC will be talked about in the next episode. All right, what did they also comment about?
A couple of people asked why you didn't mention Elvis's death.
Didn't mention his death? I mean, wasn't there enough death in the 1970s video? I mean, I think I spent the entire first 7 minutes of the video talking about how everyone died.
I gotta do this first.
I think the tragedy of Elvis Presley goes beyond his death. As I mentioned, most of the rock stars who died at the beginning of the decade were 27 or younger. They were still in their prime. I mentioned in the 50s video that when he came back from the army, he was never the same, and in the 60s got lost in Hollywood.
Pedro the bull, he was smitten.
Now, I could have mentioned that Elvis did have a comeback of sorts in the late 60s, producing classic songs like Suspicious Minds.
And we can't build our dreams on suspicious minds.
But by the 70s, he was a mess. Lost in the spectacle of Las Vegas and drug use.
I don't know all the chords, so if you hear me, get my fingers caught and put in the keys back here, you know what it is.
Footage of him in his final years is really hard to watch. And sadly, he died on August 16th, 1977 of a heart attack.
I don't know, man. Some people think he's still alive.
Yes, and some people think Creed was actually a good band.
Good point.
Don't worry, folks. We'll get to them. Here's an update. Elvis Presley and now Aretha Franklin share the same date of death, Aretha in 2018. While Aretha is more of an R&B artist than a rock artist, she did a lot of notable covers like Simon & Garfunkel's Bridge Over Troubled Water. Her influence reached so many people, so many artists, and her passing is a great loss for the music community. I actually want to bring up Electric Light Orchestra, or ELO for short, a somewhat underrated band that kind of fell off our radar. Mostly conceived by Jeff Lynne, he wrote some killer tunes and turned out to be a pioneer in production. I actually have a theory that Jeff Lynne doesn't actually have a face. He's just a pair of glasses with a beard.
Huh, and I support that theory.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
In fact, we had planned on using Don't Bring Me Down as another example of rock stars with disco fever, but we kind of forgot about it.
You got me thinking that I'm wasting my time. Don't bring me down. No.
Yeah, you forgot about it. He had all the time in the world to talk about the Bee Gees, but seriously, folks, he was all like gung-ho about the Bee Gees, and I was like, why are we talking about them? Why?
I'll tell you once more before I get off the floor, don't bring me down!
You're not even on the floor.
Don't bring me down, Bruce! Hey, why didn't we talk about T-Rex?
Oh yeah, why didn't we talk about Mark Bolan?
Get it on, bang a gong, get it on.
Yeah, they were pretty big in the glam rock scene. Just don't tell Kira I said that. If I say anything that doesn't involve David Bowie, she'll never come back on my radio show. Called The Drawing Board, airing every first and third Friday of the month on 1460 AM WVOX. Here's the logo. You can edit that in, right?
Wait. You have a radio show?
Yeah. Don't you?
No. A lot of these glam rock bands, while they may have been popular in England, didn't leave as much of an impression here in the US. So they're more on the obscure side of things. And since there was so much to cover in the 70s, we had to keep to the bands we really knew well. There was one band we planned to mention late in the video's editing, one none of us even knew about called Fanny. They were an all-female rock band formed a few years before the Runaways, and were actually the first to have a top 40 hit back in 1971. We hit on them too late to integrate them into the video, but earlier this year they released their first album since 1975, Fanny Walked the Earth.
You know, I better look that up. Find out why they called themselves Fanny.
Supposedly, George Harrison came up with the name.
Ah, good old George. But seriously, we gotta talk about why you didn't include Meatloaf in the video.
When the night is over and the bat out of hell, I'll be gone.
Come on, Bat Outta Hell is one of the biggest rock albums ever. It's so awesome. In fact, it's almost kind of like a celebration of everything that made 70s classic rock great. You got the theatrics, the big epic piano introductions, Todd Rundgren's face-melting guitar solo. That's a lot of fun. Definitely another reason we had to do this 70s extra video.
Not to mention that Meatloaf was in the Spice Girls movie.
And I'll do anything for him. But I won't do that.
The Spice Girls movie? You've actually seen that?
Come on. I know for a fact you've seen the Spice Girls movie.
I haven't seen the Spice Girls movie. Hey, let's talk about Elvis Costello. I actually did not know this story beforehand. Elvis Costello was scheduled to perform his hit Less Than Zero on Saturday Night Live when this happened.
I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, there's no reason to do this song here.
Like Jimi Hendrix had done before him, Elvis launched into Radio, a protest song about the medium itself, which he had been forbidden to perform. He was subsequently banned from SNL, but his career in the States skyrocketed after this. This would have been a perfect event to include in the 70s rock video, and I'm kind of bummed we didn't get to it, but it's the perfect way to finish off this video. There's so many other artists from the 70s that could be talked about. The Steve Miller Band.
I wanna fly like an eagle, let my spirit carry me.
Steely Dan.
Things you think are precious, I can't understand. Are you reeling in the years? Stored away the time.
The Doobie Brothers.
Now, Mama, would you be right now?
Styx.
Oh man, I love Styx! Come sail away, come sail away, come sail away with me. Come sail away, come sail away, come sail away with me.
We'll see you all in the 1980s episode.
I got that one all figured out.
Yeah, sure you do.
Come sail away, come sail away, come sail away with me. Come sail away, come sail away, come sail away with me. I think I broke a vocal cord.